Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here, and in today's video, I'm going to start things out a little bit differently than I normally would. I'm going to start things out with a quote today from a pretty famous game director that I think many of you will recognize after I give you the name. But the quote is, "I feel like as we get more sophisticated with our storytelling, the criticism has to become more sophisticated." Now, who gave this quote? Well, this quote came out several years ago before a little game called The Last of Us Part 1 came out. This is a quote from game director and writer Neil Druckmann. And I found this very interesting when I was reading this today. See, I was digging through some old interviews with Neil Druckmann and Bruce Staley. I was trying to do some research for another video, and I found this quote, and it really jumped out because an article came out yesterday in Polygon, and I know a lot of people don't read Polygon, but it is one of the approved big gaming sites, and somebody who got the early review copy for The Last of Us Part 2, they put out their review. But an article came out yesterday, and it's gone pretty much under the radar. It hasn't been talked about by any of the mainstream gaming sites per se. The only site that I saw covering it actually was Forbes today, but we're going to get into that in just a bit, the reason why that is. But an article came out yesterday in Polygon, and they are saying that they were reached out to by one of the people who got an early review copy who did the review for Vice, a guy by the name of Rob Zacny. Now, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that last name correctly. I'm going to pronounce it as Zacny. If I'm getting that wrong, I apologize. I'm not trying to. But Rob Zacny has said that Sony reached out to them, a representative from the company, to discuss his review. And what he said to Polygon was, quote, "They felt some of the conclusions I reached in my review were unfair and dismissed some meaningful changes or improvements." Now, that last part where they said that he dismissed some meaningful changes or improvements, what that really means is he didn't discuss the bullet points that they wanted him to discuss, most likely gameplay improvements such as going prone or the additions of dogs to be able to sniff you out. That's generally what it means, because we've heard this before from reviewers when sometimes a publisher or developer will get upset. "Oh, you didn't mention this upgrade system we added. You didn't mention this new lighting system that we had," and all this, because they don't want you to focus so much on any of the icky negative things. No, they want you to focus on, oh, these are the glitzy improvements. These are things we can hit as bullet points on the back of the box. But while this might seem rather innocuous on the surface, Sony reaching out to a reviewer to question them about their negative review, because if you read the review that Zacny did for Vice, it was not really a very glowing review, much like the one from Polygon and Kotaku. Now, what do all three of these outlets have in common as well? Well, none of these outlets do scored reviews, and this is going to tie into what I want to discuss as well. So I did a review I did a video 2 weeks ago discussing access journalism, specifically as it is in regards to The Last of Us Part 2, but in the broader context of how access journalism in general works. Now, this right here, what this writer is saying, who reviewed the game, what Zacny is saying, this is exactly an example of what I was talking about. This is Sony reaching out and being like, hey, taps him on the shoulder, "Hey, wait a minute. Yeah, we saw this review you did. We had some questions." And now, what he says is, quote, "I was happy to unpack a bit of my reasoning, however, and I received a perfectly cordial message in response." So, he said that they were cordial. Well, I would hope they would be. I mean, after all, here you have a multi-billion-dollar corporation reaching out to an individual person, tapping them on the shoulder saying, "Hey, we noticed your review wasn't exactly glowing. Didn't you notice all these other reviews? All these other reviewers gave us great review scores." Now, why is it interesting to me that the small handful of outlets that don't do Metacritic review scores, why are they the ones that seem to be the most critical of this game in their reviews? Is that just mere coincidence that the handful of outlets that don't put scores that wouldn't affect the overall aggregate score on Metacritic, that they're the ones that actually were being honest here? Is that stretching too far? Now, generally speaking, people in the mainstream will laugh this sort of thing off. They'll suggest that there is no bias. Obviously, they'll laugh off the suggestion of paid reviews. And in my access journalism video that I did, I discussed how it's not the payment that they're worried about. It's the access that they're worried about. And when a guy like Zacny is getting reached out to, Sony's saying, "Hey, maybe he might never get another review copy. Maybe Vice is off the list now. Or maybe this was their warning shot. Like, hey, we saw what you did. Don't let it happen again. Not in so many words, of course, but certainly contacting this person personally implies that. There's really no way around it. It's a pressure move. It's an intimidation move. To what degree you want to suggest it is intimidating, well, that's up to you. That's sort of subjective. But to deny that it is an intimidation move is just being naive as far as I'm concerned. But really, it was something I read at the very end of this article, something that myself and many others have been saying for years. But now we have someone here. Polygon is on the approved list of mainstream sites. So here we have someone in this article writing so actual bit of truth here at the end of this article. It's buried all the way at the end. But if you read, I mean, this is... Actually, I was a little bit shocked to see this sort of honesty coming from a mainstream site, but this is what was said at the end of this article. This is about The Last of Us 2, but the sentiment is what I'm talking about. It's not enough that the game is selling well and that most reviews are positive. You can't fall out of line with that general consensus, even as a joke, without having to worry about whether or not a publisher will be looking over your shoulder or if hundreds of fans will blow up your social media. It is not an environment that is conducive to encouraging honest reviews or critical discussion, which is ultimately a disservice to the game itself. That's the end of the quote. Now, I would like to add it to that. It's not just a disservice to the game itself, it's a disservice to the audience for which these reviews are supposedly, theoretically, presumably supposed to be being written for. But that's an aside. What I want to discuss, again, it is not an environment that is conducive to encouraging honest reviews. There you go. There you have someone who does get early review copies. This is Patricia Hernandez, someone who's been working in the industry, definitely someone on the inside circle, okay, amongst gaming journalists, saying right there that the environment that's being bred and that developers and publishers are pushing on them, mentioning the publishers right there, looking over their shoulder, it's not conducive to encouraging honest reviews or critical discussion. That's exactly the point that myself and many others have been making for years, and it's been getting poo-pooed by so many people. And anytime a game comes out, the fans of that game want to line up and say that, oh, you guys just want to be negative, rah, 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 rah. You don't want to... No. This is the problem. It's the fact that the gaming media thinks that they all have to share the same opinion. This is not just going to The Last of Us 2. Go back and look at some of the other very high Metacritic scores over the last couple of years, like God of War, Red Dead Redemption, etc. There's no dissenting opinion. Maybe one mixed review out of 100 plus. With God of War, there was literally, if you go to Metacritic and look at God of War, literally not one review from critics is listed as a mixed review. 100% good reviews. Now, I'm sorry. There's no game, there's no movie, there's no television show that you can get 100 different people to have consensus on. That's just not going to happen. Not unless, like this article says, there's outside pressure being forced. Or at least implied pressure being forced. Like I said, when Sony... How many reviews of that game were actually negative? Just a handful. It's coming from the early approved review sources. The people who had their reviews out on the 12th of June. Who were under NDA. Who, by the way, couldn't really discuss the game hardly at all. Who couldn't discuss Abby or any of the story or any of the locations that happened after the very... They couldn't discuss any of the plot twists or anything like that. They just had to be extremely vague. As vague as possible in their reviews. The NDAs were extremely strict. Famously strict with The Last of Us Part 2. And what have we seen since then? Anyone who's criticizing the game, you get Druckmann, Troy Baker, these critics. The critics. Well, that's really strange. The quote I said again at the beginning from Neil Druckmann himself, because of course he fancies himself as a sophisticated storyteller, and he's saying right there, the criticism has to become more sophisticated. A lot of people have gotten mad at the critique that the story has received for The Last of Us Part 2. A lot of people have been, why is this game getting focused on so narrowly where all these other games don't do that? No one focuses on the story so hard. Well, it's pretty simple. Most people who put out a game don't talk nonstop about how great their writing skills are and how deep they're writing it. Neil Druckmann does. That's kind of his thing. And everyone who wrote reviews about the story, who was giving it 10s out of 10s, were talking about how it's masterpiece writing. I had someone in my comments today trying to compare it to Shakespeare. I wish I was lying, but I'm not. But the problem is when we can't have honest conversations, or if anyone who is trying to criticize something is getting attacked by the very people who made the game, who can't accept any criticism, even though many years ago they themselves said, oh yes, we're telling sophisticated stories, so please give us sophisticated critique. Well, apparently they don't really want that. They don't want that at all. They just seem to want effusive praise. And like the article said, that doesn't benefit the game, and it doesn't benefit the audience as well. And I don't think it is a good look for Sony to be reaching out to anybody about their review in any form, unless there was like some sort of technical, like if they said like the price for this game is $80 and Sony's like, oh no wait, it's supposed to be like, unless it's a fact-based error that was made, something like that, something that was just demonstrably not true. But if you're talking about someone's opinion about the game, why are you reaching out to them? You were concerned about some of the things that they said. And we've heard rumbles about this happening with other games before. There's even been stories from way back about, I believe it was Konami actually got somebody fired from a major outlet at one point. And I want to discuss something else that I heard this week in a podcast from Sacred Symbols. Many of you know who Colin Moriarty is. Now, he's on the complete opposite side of the mainstream gaming press. He's been ostracized by most of those people, so he's not really in that circle anymore. And he doesn't get the early review copies either. But I was listening to his podcast this week, and he was discussing how he himself is friends. He said he's personal friends with Neil Druckmann, the writer of The Last of Us Part 2, director. And he said, Colin said, during his playthrough, he had different screenshots he had taken. He had some bugs and glitches, I guess, with invisible guns showing up with Ellie and stuff like that. So he had taken some screenshots, and he was going to post them on social media, he said. And then he decided not to. And the reason why he's decided not to is because he didn't want to, make Neil look foolish or to upset his friend Neil Druckmann. And he said in his podcast that he had never really taken the accusations of bias very seriously up until that moment. And that it made him stop and think like, oh, maybe, yes, I guess I do have some bias here. Because if I'm not willing to post these screen caps, even in a joking manner, out of fear of upsetting my friend Neil Druckmann, well, obviously there's a conflict of interest there. Obviously there's some form of bias. And that's what I was discussing in my video 2 weeks ago. And so now we have, what I say, some admission coming from people who are on the inside. I know Moriarty has, like I said, he's kind of ostracized at this point through for ridiculous reasons on Twitter. But, I mean, Twitter's a ridiculous place anyway. But that's besides the point. The fact is we have two people on opposite sides of the industry, but are both more or less on the inside, a lot more than most of us are, both kind of saying the same thing. Yes, there actually is bias going on here. Yes, there is pressure being applied, whether it be something as minor as Colin not wanting to post screenshots for fear of offending someone that he's, quote, friends with, who develops games, and we know how incestuous the relationships are with a lot of these people. I mean, they get interviews one-on-one, they go E3, they get flown out for presentations and whatnot. I mean, the relationship between games journalists from mainstream sites and developers is very, very incestuous, and has been for a very long time, going all the way back really to like Nintendo Power Magazine. But the point is this, the cracks are starting to show, and as the developers of this game and other people like Cory Barlog have been jumping off the top rope to help with the pylon, we've been seeing a war brewing. And now developers and these mainstream sites, some of these people are going back and forth and they're turning their cannons on each other the same way they've been turning them on us, the players, for so many years. It's been going on for a very long time. And while I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's completely unentertaining to watch, it's very interesting. And I think it just proves what many people have been saying for many years, that these sites are viewed as marketing arms for the developers and the publishers. If you want to keep denying that, I really don't know what to tell you, because it's plain as day. And when I see articles like this with a little bit of honesty coming from a place like Polygon saying, yeah, we can't review games honestly. if you're getting early review copies, you have to be in lockstep with one another. I've seen quotes from some other people who work at big sites saying the same thing. They don't even want to discuss this game at all. Because if they have criticisms of it, they're going to get hammered and they're going to lose access. Or they're going to get into fights with people that are their peers. And they don't want that. That's the last thing they want. And I think it's important to keep that in mind as I turn to the next topic I want to discuss here. And I want you to see, after everything I just said, how this is going to tie into maybe potentially Cyberpunk 2077. Now, I want to say right off the bat, I'm not going to say right now if the game's going to be good or bad, but what I do want to say is, in the last week, we've got a lot of preview stuff going on. A lot of different people here on YouTube, all the mainstream sites, they got their preview demo, they got to play the game early, they got to put out their opinions, and what do we see? Pretty much 100% universal praise. Now, maybe the game will be great. We don't know. None of us have played it. People who have played it, well, do they have any incentive to go in off the script? Do they have any incentive to get out of lockstep with the rest of their peers? To go against the hype? Now, I know there's a lot of people who think that CD Projekt Red does nothing wrong. And I actually had to work to dig this quote out. I had to find this quote because I knew that if I didn't actually find it myself, that people would accuse me of making this up. But last year, there was a quote that I saw from CD Projekt Red which really opened my eyes that I don't think enough people latched onto. And this is exactly the sort of thing I'm talking about, and it ties in directly to this video. And it was in regarding to the fact that they had a behind closed doors E3 demo that only the press could see. Only hand-picked people were allowed to see this demo. And what they said at the time, this is from CD Projekt Red. Releasing gameplay right away would make the Gamescom presentations pointless. That's what they were going to be going to next, was they were going to present some stuff at Gamescom. But this is what I want to point out. Quote, releasing gameplay right away would make the presentation pointless and would significantly limit our chance to build hype. Significantly limit our chance to build hype. I also did a video about CD Projekt Red and Cyberpunk 2077 the last time this game got delayed a few months back. Now, it was my theory at the time that the game was probably going to get delayed again because this is how CD Projekt Red does their marketing cycle. So these constant delays that we've seen coming from them, it's not surprising to me. This is exactly what I expected. Now, there's obviously extraneous circumstances that have come in the intervening months since I did that original video. Obviously, there's worldwide situation going on that's affected a lot of game releases. So it would be disingenuous of me to say that the delays that we've seen for this game are only part of the marketing cycle. But as I pointed out before, we've seen this before from CD Projekt Red, other companies like Rockstar, Naughty Dog, we saw with The Last of Us 2. They have a cycle where they will announce a game, and then it actually takes them more than a year to actually release it after their initial launch date. They delay it, they delay it, they delay it again. In this case with Cyberpunk 2077, don't forget the original release date was supposed to have happened almost a year ago. Almost a year it's been. I think the game was originally slated to come out about 10 months ago, and now it's being pushed back over a year from that original launch date. So when they talked about controlling the hype, building the hype, they want their chance to build the hype. They want to control it. It's the same thing Naughty Dog wanted to do. They wanted to control the messaging. They wanted to present some fake trailers. They wanted to present everything that they wanted to show and nothing else. They didn't want anyone to see anything else. So when I see the non-stop praise coming for Cyberpunk 2077, again, maybe it's going to be the greatest game. I don't know. You don't know either, though. That's the thing. It's all just hype. And it's working. It's certainly working. Because I was talking to people this week in real life who never talked to me about games, and they were excited about this game. And I didn't even know some of these people played games, and they were talking about this game. So, obviously the marketing's working, but my whole point is this. The whole point of what I was wanting to get here. If we can't trust the marketing hype for games like The Last of Us Part 2 necessarily, and if we know that there's undue pressure being applied to the people who have this inside access, and if they step out of line, places like Sony are tapping them on the shoulder and saying, hey, we noticed what you did. What do you think the odds are that there's similar pressure coming from their peers and inside the industry with an early preview event for Cyberpunk. Again, for the 5th time, maybe the game will be great, but I don't know and you don't know. But just maybe keep in the back of your mind to keep your hype in check. Because as we've been starting to see now, there's been some cracks being shown, and some people on the inside are starting to admit that, yeah, there's undue pressure being applied to them. It's not surprising, and it's something that's been pointing out for years. But it's there, and some of them are finally starting to admit to it. That's the only point I wanted to make here today. Just keep your hype in check, because we cannot trust these sources. They are not able to be completely honest with us, even if they claim that they are. It's simply not a thing. There's conflict of interest there, and to deny it is to deny reality. Anyway, that's it for me, Coach Toolshed. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Please subscribe if you want to stay in tune with the channel headed forward, and as always, keep it turned to 11.